A very good morning once again, and many thanks for staying with us right here on the #1 breakfast show in the country, Morning at NTV. Well, via Zoom, we are now going to be joined by Norbert Mao, the DP President General in that regard, to talk about the issue of bail and why it is taking center stage right now. A very good morning, Mr. Norbert Mao. Thank you for joining us from Peche Gulu.
Thank you, Romeo. Greetings from Peche in Gulu.
Indeed. I'll shoot straight. The Electoral Commission did get your notification that you would want to have a referendum on this issue of bail. But why? The issue of timing. Why are you calling for a referendum, Mr. Norbert Mao?
Many people have been talking about the issue of bail. We think it is a very important subject. Democracy has got to be consultative, and under the Constitution, power belongs to the people. But more importantly, we believe that since the right to a fair trial is one of the entrenched articles of the Constitution, it cannot be amended without a resort to a referendum. So basically, it is an automatic demand by the Constitution that the people must have a say through a referendum. It is a constitutional command.
I see. What will it take to make this happen, Mr. Mao?
We have already initiated the preliminaries. In DP, we don't just talk, we act. So we wrote to the Electoral Commission, they received our letter. This week, we believe we shall be hosted by the EC for a meeting to discuss procedure. And thereafter, we shall issue out forms. We need to get at least 10% of signatures of all registered voters. And that we are capable of doing. So all we require is for the EC to accept our move. After all, when we next meet the EC, we shall be submitting the millions of signatures of Ugandans, and then they will have to organize the referendum, in which citizens will be participating. Those who oppose the idea will also participate, and those who support us, we will also be framing the question. And I believe that the question is about telling Parliament not to amend those provisions of the Constitution that will tie the hands of the judiciary. We believe that judicial discretion is very important in a fair trial. We also believe that by touching that part of the Constitution, the members of Parliament will have interfered with judicial independence. Those are the questions that we will be framing.
Mr. Mao, do you concur with other opposition groups when they say that this conversation on tightening the discretion of the judicial officers and the police officers to issue out bail and bond respectively is actually a political witch hunt, looking for opposition politicians? Case in point, Muhammad Sagidinya and Alan Sewanyana, who are grappling with attempted murder and murder charges and terrorism, aiding and abetting within court.
The purpose of the referendum DP is initiating...
Not the referendum itself, the issue of bail. Is it a political witch hunt to look for opposition groups and individuals?
You cannot put that beyond a government like ours. In any case, if you want evidence that this is political witch hunt, then tell me one case where the government has even persisted or successfully prosecuted a single case. Why did they arrest the other priest, then immediately release him? And the next thing we hear is DPP has decided to drop the case. So there's enough ground to suspect that this is political ping pong, and it is just intended to intimidate the opposition. So it is right that it is not just witch hunt, but it is persecution. It has been persistent, the record is there.
What is the endgame, Mr. Mao, if the Electoral Commission refuses to go with this proposal on a referendum? Will you then go to a court?
There is no way the Electoral Commission can refuse, because our proposal is extremely reasonable. If the Electoral Commission delays or refuses, then it is the duty of the court to issue an order of mandamus. An order of mandamus is intended to compel a public body to do its duty. It is the duty of the Electoral Commission to facilitate elections and referenda.
Mr. Mao, take us through the legal roadblocks that the state is already grappling with to get its way, the fact that the Supreme Court already ruled against the state on this matter.
I don't see any legal roadblocks. The only roadblocks that I see now are really political. First and foremost, I see that the government is beginning to soften its stance. I listened to the president. He said that he believes that this matter should be debated. In any debate, it means you accept to be persuaded, and also you invest your energy to persuade others. So the legal arguments we have are simple. We are defending judicial independence. Let the judges of Uganda continue to exercise the prerogative to grant bail. There is no automatic bail in Uganda. Nobody should be misled. In fact, more Ugandans are denied bail than are given bail. Many people are in prison. They already served the number of years they would have served had they been found guilty, but they are still on remand. A person is being tried for an offense for which the maximum sentence is 5 years, and they have spent 7 years on remand. These are the issues we should be debating. Secondly, the article we are talking about is entrenched because you cannot amend the article of the Constitution relating to the right to a fair trial unless you call for a referendum. Therefore, the moment we file our signatures with the Electoral Commission, we will then have the right to go to court to stop Parliament from further debating this matter because it is an entrenched article. Those are the legal foundations of our move. The political foundations are simple. The political foundations are the right of the people to participate in making decisions that affect them. These decisions affect us. Some of the people in power right now think that the decision will not affect them. But like I've said before, in Uganda, such moves tend to catch up with their promoters. You remember in the Obote I regime, those who were very active in enacting the public safety law, the detention without trial law, eventually ended up being ensnared by the very traps they thought they had set for their enemies. So our duty is also to warn those in power now that beware, history can make a fool of you.
Well, Mr. Mao, let's talk about what government is saying about this issue. Government is saying that when individuals are released on bail, they can go ahead to rear their very ugly heads. And the case in point is Howard Openjuru, the leader of the Uganda Homeland Liberation Front, who was released on bail. Later on, he was attacking the Zombo detachment. He was attacking soldiers and killing people, orchestrating attacks within this country after being issued bail. Don't you think there are special cases where, you know, it should be made difficult for some individuals to receive bail if they are very, very dangerous to society? You've written articles pointing out examples from the US, people who are involved in mass shootings. They have been held and they haven't been released on bail. So why is it so hard for Uganda to also take the same direction?
I would like to let our viewers know that all over the world, there is a debate raging on bail reform. The world is not what it used to be long ago. Criminals have become more sophisticated. We have now mass murderers, people who can detonate bombs and kill thousands. Those are facts. We have got global terrorism. We have got projects that are being sponsored by very rich countries in the world to promote terror, to suppress certain people and to promote certain ideologies. We are aware of those realities. What we are proposing is that the judges should be able to decide. We also wish to accept that if the judges need the input of victims of crime before they make a decision on bail, that should be allowed. So there is no way we are ignoring the interests of the victims. Nobody should think that those of us who are opposing the tying of the hands of judges don't care for the victims of crime. In fact, DP is very tough on crime. We are tough on crime to the extent that we believe that this discretion should continue. Otherwise, we would be saying bail should be an automatic right. That's not our argument. We are saying the right to apply for bail should continue to be in our constitution, and our judges should look at the evidence. And that evidence can include the input of victims of crime. If, for instance, somebody has committed murder in a particular village in Masaka, during the hearing on bail, the victims' families can be invited to make their input. And in making the decision whether to grant bail or not, that input should be taken into account. Those are things that we concede. We are not radically opposed to the input of victims. What we are opposed to is tying the hands of our judiciary so that the political decision makers can now determine who gets bail and who does not get bail. In any case, many of the cases that are profiled against political leaders have no supporting evidence. So these cases are used to terrorize and disorganize political opponents of the government in power. So the only way the government can answer that argument is to say, look, we shall make sure our prosecutors are more vigilant in opposing bail. We shall bring evidence that the people who are applying for bail can be a danger to society. In any case, it is the duty of the government to protect public safety. But denying bail alone is not the only way to guarantee the safety of citizens. There are other organs of government, the police, the intelligence community, and even the military. That's their duty. But now they are behaving as if that criminals who are released on bail continue to commit crime simply because they got bail. Why are the police not taking charge of those? Those who are on bail should also be monitored. All those are actions that are squarely in the mandate of the government. It is just not hinged on bail alone.
Mr. Mao, on this subject, really, we've been actually talking to the Attorney General, asking him a few questions here and there. He's been very, very elusive on this subject. He has no answers on this issue. But do you believe they have the legal manpower put in place to put together a competing argument and make this a reality, tightening the discretion of the judicial officers and police officers to award bail? Do they have the legal manpower in place?
Romeo, as the DP, we believe that what is lacking is just the will. Let me call it the political will. I was very pleased to see new recruitments of magistrate grade 1, and I want to salute the judicial arm, and particularly the Chief Justice, for that initiative. Now we believe that cases will be tried faster. We now need to recruit more prosecutors and train them better. Thirdly, we also need to motivate them better. There's currently a debate over salary reviews, enhancement of terms and conditions that will make people to work with their full energies. That debate is going on for teachers. I do not see why our magistrates, our state attorneys should also not be well remunerated. The judges for now are those of the High Court and the upper courts. So far, I believe their terms of service have been made a lot better. Even their retirement benefits are very good. It is now time to focus on those who are below. But the Attorney General knows his mandate. I've had a conversation with the Attorney General, not in detail. In DP, we believe in engaging. It's not our duty to enrage the government. It is our duty to engage the government. So we expect to meet with the Attorney General and put our case. There may be situations where they may persuade us. We are open to persuasion if the arguments are convincing, but we also call upon the Attorney General, the President, and the government to be open to persuasion if our arguments are persuasive. But these are things that must go hand in hand. Right now, in fact, since 2018, President Museveni has been complaining about a number of constitutional issues, as you recall, Romeo.
Indeed.
He complained about land. He once brought an amendment to amend Article 26, saying the government should have the right to compulsorily acquire land and discuss compensation afterwards.
I see.
We were able to persuade the government to abandon that line of thought that if you want to grab land, or rather to compulsorily acquire, you have got to pay compensation at the market rate, and that payment should be done prior to the acquisition of the land. In that case, the government was persuaded. We believe that in this case also, the government will be persuaded, and that will make the referendum unnecessary. The debate is still raging on. The Attorney General has got to ask for a bigger budget. It is his mandate to ensure that his staff are capable of persuading judges. The answer is not tying the hands of the judges. The answer is in making sure that prosecutors are more vigilant. The answer is in ensuring that victims of violent crime have a say on decisions regarding bail. These are the things the Democratic Party is calling for.
Mr. Mao, besides tightening the discretion of the judicial officers vis-a-vis the police officers to award bail and bond respectively, do you concur with political experts who say that this is another attempt by the executive to actually influence the judiciary, just like they've done with Parliament or the legislature, if you will? Remember the invasion of Parliament and so forth, whatever has been happening within the August House. Do you think the president is attempting to do the same to the judiciary, influencing the other arm of government?
The arms of government are supposed to be independent of each other, but they are not supposed to work in isolation. For instance, when the executive branch initiates legislation, that legislation goes to Parliament. And in Parliament, all the citizens have got the right to make their input in the parliamentary committees. Anybody can walk from the streets and go and present a memorandum. It's the duty of Parliament actually to advertise in newspapers about a particular bill under consideration so that interested parties may make their input. When the law is passed, another level of balance is in the hands of the president. A law does not take effect unless the president has signed it. By refusing to sign, the president sends a signal that he is not satisfied. Now, it doesn't mean that Parliament is thereby not independent. It simply anchors a key principle of democracy, which is checks and balances and separation of powers. If the president manages to persuade the Parliament to change certain provisions, then the Parliament will change those provisions and send back the bill to the president for signature. But that's not the end. If the law by any means clashes with provisions of the Constitution, which is the supreme law, then any citizen can run to court. And again, the courts exercise a review. They have their power of constitutional review, the Parliament. Now, those moves are healthy. It does not when citizens go to court and the court overturns a law which has been passed by Parliament and signed by the president. It doesn't mean that the courts are invading the territories of the legislature and the executive. That is the principle of checks and balances. But in this case, the president is making this proposal that judges have no discretion to grant bail in cases of capital offenses. That's like murder. There's terrorism, whose definition is very fluid. Then there's what they call aggravated robbery. Many people who want to grab land from villagers have the villagers charged with aggravated robbery simply because a villager is carrying a machete or a spear. They are put away for several months. In the meantime, using corrupt officials, the land grabber gets a land title. By the time the victim of land grabbing is back from jail, the land is gone. So we need to have a comprehensive look at what is the motivation of this law. I do not think that the idea of mob justice alone justifies this law. Mob justice is not just because of bail. Mob justice is because the courts are too slow. The right to a speedy trial virtually does not exist in Uganda. because of how undercapacitated the judiciary is. So it is right to say the move to deny judges the judicial discretion to grant bail is a direct invasion on the independence of the judiciary. We have seen that before. There was now this is a legal invasion, but there has also been political invasion. One time the president said that he would like to appoint cadres to be the judges. So if indeed he has appointed cadres, why doesn't he trust them? Then there's the problem of corruption in the judiciary. Many people virtually don't want to go to court because they think that justice is only for the highest bidder. If you cannot pay for justice, you will not get justice. For these reasons, the debate should not just be restricted to bail. In fact, this debate is so welcome because it is an opportunity to comprehensively discuss the justice, law, and order sector in Uganda.
Mr. Mao, if the government or the Attorney General have their way and make these changes to the Constitution to make it hard for the judicial officers and police to award bail and bond respectively, what would that mean to the Constitution and the people of this country?
Many Ugandans pinned their hopes on the new constitution. Romeo, a constitution is a document that distills the aspirations and hopes of citizens of a particular country. After decades of turmoil, Ugandans elected the Constituent Assembly. The delegates in the Constituent Assembly passed the new law. Not perfect, not the best, but I believe the best ever, the most participatory, and with enough flexibility. That constitution has now been progressively disemboweled. First, what Ugandans thought would guarantee peaceful change, namely term limits, was removed in 2005. Then the presidential age limit of 75 was also removed. This progressive disemboweling of the Constitution makes the Constitution an empty shell. Now, a fundamental human right under Chapter 4, the right to a fair trial, which among others is guaranteed by the right to bail or pre-trial release, is being attacked. The threats on land rights is ever present. So it means the government was not fully committed to have a constitution that Ugandans can live with for a long time. The constitution was tampered with hardly 10 years after it had been enacted. Therefore, the very thought of time the executive branch wants to make a move on something that serves interests undermines a culture of constitutionalism.
Indeed.
You cannot keep amending fundamental laws at the political whims of leaders who are in power. A constitution is supposed to endure. As a result, what was promised that for once Ugandans would see change without bloodshed is under threat. Everybody is talking about political transition. We do not know what else can guarantee political transition other than a stable constitution. Ugandans want to see what we call a trans-regime army. Historically, every government in Uganda comes with its own army. When a new government comes in with guns blazing, the old government disappears.
I see.
And the army dissipates. So what we are doing is also to defend the constitution, but above all, the culture of constitutionalism.
Mr. Mao, you did mention that there is nothing that will ensure transition except a very, very strong constitution. But then people like the FDC, Kizza Besigye, are saying that the People's Front for Transition is that special purpose vehicle that will go ahead in ensuring this transition ahead of 2026. But then the problem is NUP is shunning the coalition, and other political parties within the opposition are also shunning this coalition. Do you think they have what it takes to dislodge President Museveni in 2026 when they are disunited?
It is not true that anybody is shunning that initiative. Everybody has initiatives. We have one battle to restore confidence in democratization. We cannot talk about democracy. We can only talk about democratization. We have had many initiatives in the past, and each of them make a contribution. It is my hope that even this People's Front for Transition makes its contribution. In any case, this is not an election year, so there's no jostling for positions. They are not going to fall into the trap of electoralism. I have had a very candid conversation with Kanokiza Besigye. We expressed our reservation about the new initiative, which I will state here publicly.
Indeed.
We have only one reservation. In the last election cycle and the previous ones, as the opposition, we have failed to come together. Now, we have said very hurtful things about each other. We have made allegations. People like me have been accused of all sorts of things. People keep on accusing others of being moles and so on. So I proposed that before we even think of any joint initiative, we must first sit together in a room, tell each other off, so to speak.
Mr. Mao,
talk about the hurtful things
Mr. Mao,
about each other. Cleanse our hearts, then we can agree on an initiative.
Mr. Mao, what the viewer wants to know is why these coalitions tend to fail. You did launch one last year, the Special Purpose Vehicle. You've had coalitions in 2011, that is the Inter-Party Coalition. You did have one in 1996, the Inter-Political Forces Coalition. It was the best, but we haven't seen any coalition that is as strong as the Interpolitical Forces Coalition that was birthed in 1996. What do they keep failing? That's what we would like to know.
I have written extensively on this subject.
Indeed.
And I've examined attempts at coalitions. If you want to take a historical approach, when a coalition is negative, in other words, it is united more by what they oppose rather than what they believe in, such coalitions tend to fail. In 1962, the Kabaka Yeka and the UPC of Milton Obote came together, but they did not have a positive agenda. All they were pursuing was to prevent a Catholic from becoming the first Prime Minister of Uganda. What the British did in their conspiracy with the coalition partners, UPC and KY, was contrary to what they did in Tanzania and Kenya. In Kenya and Tanzania, they held one election only before grant of independence. In Uganda, they held two elections because they wanted to undermine the DP and the DP leader, Benedicto Kiwanuka. So you could call it primitive solidarity. Primitive solidarity cannot have a positive outcome. Fast forward, when the NRM took over power, DP and the NRM were in government together. There was nothing agreed upon. There was nothing formal. No wonder after 10 years, the DP leaders who had joined the executive branch walked away. Some remained, some refused to continue being part of the government. Then there was 1996, the Interpolitical Forces Corporation. That is the IPFC, which was basically a UPC and DP. In the first years of the NRM, UPC was really the strongest opposition voice, led by Cecilia Gwal, and DP was the other opposition voice. And the DP's voice became stronger and stronger, opposing the undemocratic tendencies of the government through the Uganda Young Democrats that some of us were part of, then Michael Kagwa's organization, the DP Mobilizers Group. And these are the groups that put pressure on our then leader, Dr. Semogerere, to re-examine the position of DP in the government led by NRM. The pressure made Dr. Semogerere to leave and announced that he would be challenging President Museveni in '96. That, in my view, was the best ever coalition because it had a positive agenda. It also showed that people can rise above all rivalries. Can you imagine DP and UPC working together? Can you imagine Cecilia Well standing and campaigning for Dr. Semogere?
Why can't we have it now, Mr. Mao?
We are failing to have it now because there are factors like ego. Then most of the coalitions are about political positions rather than policies.
Away from... go ahead. Thirdly?
And thirdly, of course, there's infiltration by the government itself.
I see.
The government also actively undermines these coalitions by spreading harmful propaganda, undermining these kind of moves for togetherness. But the biggest single factor has been dishonesty and bad faith. I'll give you an example. You talked about the IPC and you said it was a shining example. Let me give you one example. I sat in a meeting one time and I got to know that the IPC had endorsed the SDP leader Michael Mabike as their candidate for Lord Mayor. And it was in writing. Unfortunately, that was later changed when the current Lord Mayor, Elias Lukwago, came into the picture under an outfit comprising DP leaders known as Buganda Subi 2011.
Mr. Mao, the best coalition was Mr. Mao, the best coalition was in 1996, not the one in 2011. The Interpolitical Forces for Cooperation. It was the best coalition ever, and that's why we were saying these coalitions that preceded or came after have failed to actually master that cohesiveness that we need to actually ensure unity in our bid to oust President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Thank you very much, Mr. Mao. We've run out of time. I couldn't get to you on the issue of terrorism and what you think we should be doing instead of touting military intervention, instead of looking at other factors like bad governance and also widespread discontent. But next time we shall get you on those two factors or conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. Mao.
Thank you. And I'll make sure I'm live in your studios.
Indeed.
Thank you for having me.
That is the President General for the Democratic Party, Mr. Norbert Mao. We've had such a very, very diverse conversation. First, on the issue of bail, we did also talk about the coalitions that are failing in that regard. But next time we shall get him on the issue of terrorism. What needs to be done? You're still watching Morning at NTV. We'll be right back with more right here on this platform.